You know, sometimes you come across a news story that just makes you shake your head. So I was approached by a number of media outlets this morning and this afternoon about an article that appeared in several places, the CBC as well as Global News here in Canada. And the Global News headline was written by Stuart Bell, who's been around the national security world for quite some time. CSIS used information collected via illegal activities to get counter-terrorism warrants. This is what the Canadian court has ruled. CSIS, of course, is the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, where I used to work. And this is a federal court, which said that the CSIS, so my old organization, used information that was likely derived from illegal activities. Now, why would CSIS do this? Well, what would the warrants being? Why did they want warrants in the first place? Well, they were getting warrants to follow, monitor, and investigate Canadian foreign fighters, i.e. Canadians trying to join ISIS and other terrorist groups. And so they had to get information on who they were they planning attacks here, were they planning to leave, etc., etc., etc. And it turns out that CSIS was paying people, human sources, who may in fact have been involved in facilitating or carrying out terrorism, although I don't think carrying out terrorism is really part of that. What was happening here was that CSIS was recruiting human sources who were credible to the targets that were being followed, targets that were being investigated. If you're going to investigate a terrorist, you've got to have somebody who understands terrorism, someone who can sell themselves as a terrorist, someone who can present themselves as supportive of terrorism to gain the confidence of the people you're trying to find out what they're doing. Late breaking news. Using the Dalai Lama to investigate ISIS ain't gonna work. I have no idea what the court is thinking in this regard. Now, I will grant them that if CSIS did not disclose that they are working with some bad characters to gain this information, that's probably a no-no. And the director of CSIS, David Vignon, has said they're taking the court ruling seriously and they'll do things, blah, blah, blah. But the fundamental principle here is an extreme naivete here in Canada when it comes to how counterterrorism investigations are done. That the court was gobsmacked, shocked and appalled, as people used to say, that CSIS was dealing with ne'er-do-wells and other individuals who had checkered pasts and who were saying or doing things that, well, maybe, go beyond the pale. How can anyone not know that? What parallel universe are we living in when CSIS can only use the Girl Guides and the Boy Scouts as their human sources? The same thing goes for law enforcement. If you're trying to get someone to infiltrate a street gang or a crack cocaine cartel, are you going to use someone from the Boys and Girls Club? Or, Sister Agnes from the Convent for Immaculate Mercy? Of course you're not. You've got to use people that are going to be able to insert themselves in situations to gain the intelligence/evidence that you need to charge and bring them to court and get them off the street. The court doesn't get this. I don't know what to say. I'm absolutely gobsmacked. How can any intelligence service on the planet function if they cannot skirt that very careful line between legal and illegal activity? And again, I agree, this should have been disclosed. CSIS should have walked the court through that. Okay, here's how we do a counterterrorism investigation. A, we identify people we think are either planning an attack here in Canada or encouraging an attack in Canada or are planning to go abroad and commit an act of terrorism somewhere in the world. Once we identify that person, we have a whole array of tools that we can use to investigate them. We can apply for a court warrant, which in this case they did. We can put physical surveillance on them. Where do they go? Whom do they meet with? Who are they influencing? We can recruit human sources that infiltrate these cells, get close to these individuals to find out their plans, find out what they're talking about, find out what they're plotting, and report back to CSIS. That's how a counterterrorism investigation goes. This is not rocket science. You have to use the people who are the best positioned to get the information that you need. And yes, some of these people will either have committed illegal acts in the past or will commit minor illegal acts right now to prove their bona fides to the wankers that you're following in the first place. It is a fine line. I completely acknowledge that. And I'm sure on occasion it's gone badly wrong. But to state that CSIS paid informants, i.e. human sources, who are planning acts of terrorism, beggars disbelief. I don't know how the court got that. Now, in all fairness, I don't have access to a lot of the information. These are federal court rulings, and there's kowtowing to the courts right now. But what part of high-risk operations doesn't the court get? It doesn't get much more high risk than a counter-terrorism investigation. This is the nature of the beast. This is what they have to do. So of course the court's calling for an oversight, they're calling for a review, and this is so Canadian. When do we have a royal commission? We haven't had one of those in the past 2 weeks, have we? Let's strike a royal commission and find out exactly what's happening with respect to what our security intelligence service is doing to try and stop terrorism in our country. Maybe that's what we need to do. Sorry if I'm coming across a little strongly in this one, but I have a real hard time understanding what the court fails to see in this regard. It's just, am I biased? Absolutely I'm biased. I worked on 300 counter-terrorism cases in CSIS from 2001 to 2015. I met with sources. I trained some sources. I debriefed some sources. It wasn't my job. I was an analyst, not an investigator. I wasn't an intelligence officer, which recruits and handles sources, but I was brought in because of my expertise. I get how the game functions. And this is how the game functions. You go into the gutter to find people to get other people in the gutter. You don't go into, I'll use a Star Trek. I'm a Star Trek fan. I'll use a Star Trek analogy here. You don't recruit a source from Stratos. Remember the episode where there's a planet where there are people on clouds and people in the mines below? And the people in the clouds, they did artsy things and they ran around in togas and all that kind of shit. And the people below were mining this mineral that people on the cloud needed. But unfortunately, the mines had this terrible condition and they were making people sick. And so Kirk comes, of course. Kirk solves everything because that's what Kirk did in the 1960s. My point is that you don't recruit a source from Stratos to investigate the violence in the mines down on the planet below. It really is as simple as that. Where is this going to go? I don't know. It's all over the news right now. Everyone's apologetic. Oh my God, slap me on the wrist. We've done something wrong. The court has no confidence in CSIS. Blah 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 blah. And yeah, does CSIS have to disclose things to the court? Absolutely. That's the way the law works in this country. I have no problem with that. CSIS really should be very, very careful in informing the court when it gets to that straddling that line between things that are okay and things that are verging into potential illegality. But does CSIS have to do a terrorism 101 to the courts to say how counterterrorism investigations function? Does CSIS have to give a 101 on the mindset of a jihadi who wants to join ISIS? Or a mindset of a terrorist who wants to blow shit up in Montreal? Is that what we have to do? Make these courts understand that we have to, as I've said several times already, we have to deal with some pretty unsavory characters to get the intelligence we need to forward it to the government so it can do something with it to prevent things from blowing up. That's what CSIS does. That's the mandate. It's right there in the act. Collect intelligence on serious threats of violence that are terrorism, i.e. political, religious, and ideological motivation. Anyhow, we'll see where this goes. There'll be an inquiry, there'll be a commission, there'll be something. Very Canadian, but I'm dumbfounded sometimes at how naive some people are here in Canada. I've said it before and I'll say it again. The terrorism threat to Canada is minimal. It's very, very, very small, but it's not zero. So when we ask our security intelligence service to investigate people who may, in fact, be planning acts of terrorism here or abroad, we have to give them the tools and we have to give them the leeway to do what it is they need to do. And what they need to do is to recruit human sources that are believable to the targets that are being followed.